It's another edition of Ask the First Selectman. I'm Jim Cameron, and John Zagrodzky, our First Selectman, is here to answer your questions. We got a question from actually several people regarding a recent vote by the Board of Selectmen tabling a traffic study that was going to be done at Cherry Lawn Park. There's also been some discussion on reevaluating all of the parks and recreation programs to see if they might be better spread out to different parks as well too, to lessen the crush at Cherry Lawn. Could you speak to both of those, please, John?
Good question. So the first thing I would say is that we have an exceptional park system, and I really have to hand it to our Parks and Rec Commission, all of its members, including its chair, Lori Bora, as well as our relatively new Director of Parks and Recreation, Jen Fava, who took over almost a year ago now. And we have, I think, the best parks in the state. And so this is not about trying to fix problems with our parks, but really how to take something that's already fantastic and somehow making it better. The purpose of a traffic study was really to take a look at the flow of cars and parking on Cherry Lawn to try to get a sense for what we could do to improve the flow and capacity of all of that. And I still believe that a parking study or traffic study around Great Island ultimately is going to be necessary, at least in my view, before we spend any money redoing parking or doing any kind of substantial paving there. That said, there were some members of the public and at least a few elected officials who said, this might actually be a good time to take a step before that and say, let's just have a good solid review of our Parks and Rec strategy to the extent that it pertains to some of the activity density problems that some people are talking about. So if you think about Cherry Lawn for a moment, a lot of people who show up at Cherry Lawn aren't there to participate in a program. It's a public park and they just show up. So we're not doing anything to drive or deter that type of traffic. But we do have a lot of program activity in all of our parks. Sometimes it's scheduled sports, or it could be any number of different activities or programs that are sponsored by Parks and Rec or maybe other groups in town. That also drives traffic, not just at Cherry Lawn, but all of our parks. And so the question came up as to whether we should take a look at just the concentration or spread of those programs across all our parks and ask the question, A, do we have too many of these types of programs? Or B, are they appropriately spread among every park facility that we have? And so the request really was to do that kind of a report and have those kinds of discussions first so that we would have a good sense of that. And then if it makes sense after that, which I think it does, to do a more focused traffic study to see what specific improvements we could make. Now, I did want to say that there is a little bit of what I would call NIMBYism going on in Darien, and that's perfectly understandable. And that stands for not in my backyard. So there are folks who live in the vicinity of our parks that look at the traffic and look at the level of activity and say, I really don't like that. I wish that it was nice and quiet and there were much fewer people there. And I completely understand that. At the same time, we're running a municipality here, and that if you have a home next to a public facility, you're going to have to expect that there's going to be some traffic. We're going to do this in a responsible way and in a very transparent way. So when we have discussions about park programs and density of usage of our parks and where people are coming from, we want to make sure all that information is available to everybody so we get to an optimal solution for our parks. One last thing I'd say about that is that we got approval to spend some money to engage the services of a company called Placer AI, and that's going to take effect on July 1st. And what they do is they track anonymized cell phone location data. And so most people have location services turned on, and there's no privacy issue here. It's all anonymous, but with access to their data, we'll be able to take a longitudinal look at just the flow of people that come into all of our parks. And we'll get a sense for how many people are going there, how often they're going, at what times do they go. And if you marry that information with some of the analysis that we hope to do, we might be able to do things like schedule programs at different times so that you don't have everybody bunching up at a park all at once. So I'm actually pretty excited about that data and what it might reveal. We're going to learn a lot about not just our park traffic, but frankly, traffic in town from that capability. So anyway, more to come. To summarize, we're just going to have the Parks and Rec Commission and our new director present their vision for programming at our parks and their sense of how busy our parks are and why. And we'll digest that and then try to move on to a more tangible study, like a traffic study, to see what specific improvements we could make to make access to our parks better for everybody.
If you have a question for our first selectman, send it along to us and we'll ask it on your behalf. Just email us at darientv79@gmail.com.